All right, you're streaming live. You're good to go, G.
We all set then?
Yes, ma'am.
Wonderful, thank you. Well, I'd like to call this meeting to order. It's 5:30 p.m. today on May 10th. This is the fourth meeting and the first public hearing of the Independent Citizen Redistricting Commission. May I have the Assistant City Clerk conduct roll call of attendees for purposes of identifying who's here and also to assure that we have a quorum.
Absolutely, Madam Chair. Okay, Commissioner Brechner. Commissioner Donato.
Present.
Commissioner Grazier.
Present.
Commissioner Mckenzie.
Present.
Chair Ortiz.
Present.
Commissioner Quintana. Present. And Commissioner Reckers. Madam Chair, you have a quorum.
Wonderful, thank you. So let's move on to approval of the agenda. We have an agenda before us. I will entertain a motion along with a second for approval of the agenda as presented.
So moved. Second.
I have a motion by Commissioner Grazier and a second by Commissioner Donato. Any discussion on the agenda as presented?
Yes, Madam Chair. Since this is a public hearing, and since we are required to have 4 public hearings, I wonder if the agenda could note that this is a public hearing in some way or another. I don't know where the appropriate place would be, perhaps in one of the numbered items further down, that it is a public hearing item.
That's certainly not a problem. Probably looking at the agenda. It was noticed as a public meeting. Our 4 public meetings have already been noticed.
Okay.
So that was out in the press release. I'm sure, hopefully you all saw the press release that went out on Friday.
Yep.
But there's nothing wrong with including the fact that this is a public meeting on the agenda. We do have public comment on there, but we've also had that at other meetings. So that,
it just, for the final record of the meeting, it just shows that we're recognizing this as one of the public hearings meeting the requirement.
Where do you suggest placing that, Commissioner?
I think Mr. Donato has a suggestion.
Commissioner Donato.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Commissioner Brechner, Madam Chair identified this in her opening remarks as the first public hearing, but I think we can also add it, that will be in the minutes, but we can also add that as not only public comment under item number 7, but public hearing with comments.
Okay. That's a great idea. Now, you made the second to the motion, Commissioner Grazier. Does that work for you, having number 7 say public hearing? And
my name is Chris Longley Postema, and my colleague Billy Griffin work for NV5.
I'm sorry, I totally missed that. That was not one of our commissioners, right? Are we getting feedback from somewhere else? It sounds like. Or do we have public individuals join in our conversation?
No, Madam Chair, it looked like someone had their microphone unmuted, so I just went ahead and muted the microphone for the member that had it.
Okay, thank you so much. Okay, the question before us to Commissioner Grazier and Commissioner Donato suggested it, followed by Commissioner Brechner's comment, that item number 7 say public hearing and comment. Would that suffice, gentlemen and members of the commission? Is that included in the motion? Commissioner Grazier and Donato?
Yes,
that would be included in the motion.
Yes, and I would agree with that as a second.
Okay, wonderful. Any other comments on the agenda? Okay, yes, Commissioner
Now
Rikers.
it's just one of the-
Rikers, yeah, I'm still getting more noise in there. There's somebody talking.
Yeah, I just heard it as well. So, Madam Clerk, could you please make sure that everyone is muted except the commissioners?
Yes, it's actually Miss Reeker's microphone that keeps unmuting. So it looks like she has her hand up.
Just
I'm
spoke.
happy to unmute her now if you're ready to discuss.
She actually just spoke and said that she's still hearing the feedback.
It's from her microphone.
Oh,
I'm
okay.
having to mute her. Yes.
I see, okay. All right, so do we need to do something further with Commissioner Rieker? She's asking a question, Madam Clerk.
I think just in general, most people keep their microphone muted until it's their moment to speak, and then they unmute their microphone or raise their hand.
Okay, Commissioner Riekers, is there anything else you need to share? Are you still getting feedback at this moment? We cannot hear you.
I don't think she's talking to us.
Yes. Okay, okay, well, we'll let her raise her hand if she needs to visit with us. So we have a motion on the table and a second that will approve the agenda with the addition to the word hearing in item number 7. Any further discussion on that? We need to take a roll call. Roll call on approval of the minutes of the agenda as amended. Madam Assistant Clerk, could you please take roll call?
Yes. Commissioner Brechner,
Yes.
Commissioner Donato,
Yes.
Commissioner Grazer,
Yes.
Commissioner Mckenzie,
Yes.
Chair Ortiz,
Yes.
Commissioner Quintana,
Yes.
and Commissioner Rickers. Motion is passed.
Thank you very much. Did Commissioner Rikers have a need to speak? You raised your hand. Did
No,
you
I
need
was
to-
just trying to say, yes, I was muted and I didn't want you to. I figured I want you to know it's a yes.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate that. All right, so we have unanimous. The agenda has been approved as amended. Let's move on to approval of the minutes. And I will entertain a motion and a second for the approval of the minutes for the April 28th meeting. Do I hear a motion?
So moved.
I have a motion from Commissioner Grazer. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Second from Commissioner Mckenzie for approval of the minutes. Any discussion?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Brechner?
Madam Chair. This will be similar to my prior suggestions for just fleshing out the minutes a little bit. And I'm sorry I didn't get my notes to anybody in writing, but if these are approved, I'll send them so that they can be documented, because I've got them written down here. But I would suggest perhaps that our minutes just show all the agenda items that we covered that were in the agenda that was approved for that meeting. And where nothing happens, for instance, there were no public comments, just say none. I don't recall staff having any comments, just say none. And the numbering can remain the same as what the agenda was. And then number 6, as per the agenda item, which would be the research and polling presentation, that would add including explanation of 5 redistricting proposals, review of population data for each, and review of any impact on community associations and homeowners associations. So that would be the addition to number 6. And number 8, let's see, commission discussion and discussion and questions regarding research and polling presentation would be matters from the commission. So with those 2 changes, That's what I would suggest to amend the minutes.
Okay, any further additions to the minutes? So that motion was made by Commissioner Grazier and Mckenzie, right? Did I get that right? Are those additions agreeable to you all?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Any questions from commissioners? Do you all understand what we're doing? Basically aligning the minute numbers and titles with what the agenda was, and then adding a little bit of verbiage at the tail end. Yeah, we're good? Shall I call for a vote? Are we all set? Madam Assistant City Clerk, please take roll call on the amended motion for approval of the minutes of April 28th.
Okay. Commissioner Brechner,
Yes,
Commissioner Donato,
Yes.
Commissioner Grazier,
Yes.
Commissioner Mckenzie,
Yes.
Chair Ortiz,
Yes.
Commissioner Quintana,
Yes.
Commissioner Reckers. Okay, motion is approved as amended.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
And thank you, Commissioner Brechner, for those additions, and thank you, members, for making the motions. Okay, so before we move forward, I'd just like to spend a second to have the commissioners introduce themselves, because I'm hoping we have people listening in, and just a brief introduction so that the citizens that are watching us will know, number one, which district we represent, if we're representing a district, and who we are. And I'll just begin real briefly, and then we'll go. I guess maybe I should just call you, because we won't know what order to go in. So why don't I just have the vice chair start by introducing himself, and then I'll be last. And then I'll call each commissioner as we move forward.
thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate it. I'm Burl Brechner. I am an at-large member. I don't represent a specific district. I live in District 2, but I'm not representing District 2. And I've lived in Santa Fe for 6 years and have followed city government matters, tried to stay close to them, and appreciate very much this opportunity to serve the city and the public. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Quintana?
Hello, my name is Carmela Quintana, and I am born and raised in Santa Fe, New Mexico, and left for a little bit after graduating from the University of New Mexico to serve in the Air Force. I now work for the United States Senate, and I live in District 2 and vote in District 2, but I have also lived in District 1 and still voted in District 2 because that's where my absentee ballot was. And I am very happy to be here, and I appreciate everyone's input. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Grazier?
Thank you. My name is Chris Grazier. I'm an attorney in private practice. I've been involved in local government matters of various sorts for 25 years in Santa Fe. And I am a resident and the representative on this commission of District 1.
Thank you. Commissioner Reckers?
My name is Gail Riekers, and I live in District 1. We bought the house here about 12 years ago, but had to leave for jobs and just moved back during the pandemic, and are very, very glad to be here. And I'm the statistician, yes. So I want you to know that.
Thank you. Commissioner Donato?
Yes, good evening. My name is Gary Donato. I recently moved here about 8 months ago from Boston area. I'm a retired military officer, Navy, nuclear weapons officer, and I'm also a retired professor from Boston universities. I've served in every town that I've ever lived in, local government, and I'm proud to be serving my new town here of Santa Fe.
Thank you. Commissioner Mckenzie?
Hello, everyone. My name is Nicholas Mckenzie. I'm the commissioner for District 3. I'm also a Navy veteran and a immigrant from Jamaica originally. I'm just here to, do what we can to ensure that we represent the city of Santa Fe accordingly.
Thank you. And I am Lily Mae Ortiz, native-born gal from northern New Mexico, worked for the Department of Finance, state government here in Santa Fe for a little over 27 years, have been an elected school board member for 12 years, and am pleased to be working with this great group of people on this important work that we have and look forward to a great outcome. So those are the commissioners. I also would like to have, because the next item is the matters from the staff, maybe Madam City Clerk or Madam Assistant Clerk, whichever, could introduce the staff that's present so those listening will know who's joining us. And then I'll have our consultants introduce themselves as we get to that point. Madam City Clerk.
Sure. My name is Christine Bustos-Mahalsek. I'm the city clerk. We also have our assistant city clerk, Geraldine Cardenas, on with us. And we have Marcos Martinez, our assistant city attorney, and we have Leonard Padilla from our GIS department as well.
Great. Wonderful. And I have to say, you all have been doing a really great job supporting us and getting us to this point in, as we move forward. So, Madam City Clerk, is there anything that you need to report to us before we move on to the presentation?
I'd just be happy to know that we did send out an email notification to residents across every district in the city of Santa Fe last week. It also went to our media distribution. It is posted on our website. It was posted on our Twitter account as well. And it was in our Sunday meetings list that the city of Santa Fe publishes, notifying residents of upcoming meetings for the week. And then I also just want to note that we've continued to build out and add on to the redistricting page. As you all know, you are able to access it from the homepage of the City of Santa Fe website, and additional meetings and additional maps page was added, including some really great interactive maps that Mr. Padilla created. And then we also loaded some additional still maps that also had current district numbers, and then district numbers for each concept as well, so that there was a quick reference, for anyone looking for that information. So those are my quick updates. We will continue to include these meetings, the public hearings, in our weekly Santa Fe New Mexican ad. And then we also will continue to promote these meetings per district as they move to in-person and district specific. So those are the updates I have, but if you have any other items, please let me know.
Wonderful, good information. There was a lot of work done there, and the information is starting to trickle out there. Commissioners, any questions for Madam City Clerk regarding publicity and information that's being put out? Commissioner Brechner.
Thank you. Madam City Clerk, if as you add items to the webpage, could you just maybe alert the commissioners that there's additional information so we can take a look at it? I had looked at it several days ago, but I haven't since, so there might be items I haven't seen, and I think maybe we all would appreciate the notification that there's new material been added. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Brechner. Anyone else? Anything else? Okay, well, that brings us to the highlight of our evening, our presentation. And I'm going to call on Mr. Sanderoff and his very qualified staff to join us and share with us more information so that we can truly understand what's going on. And then hopefully we have some members of the public listening and they can also be enlightened. So I'm turning it over to Mr. Sanderoff.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Commissioners. Again, I'm Brian Sanderoff with Research and Polling. Brittany Poss is also here tonight as well, as she has been for the other meetings. And Michael Sharp from Research and Polling has also been strongly involved in this process. Brittany is the Director of Data and Analytics at Research and Polling and doing a great job staffing the process for you. And if we can, Brittany, talk about our PowerPoint show. And so this is the first public meeting. And as such, we wanted to review some of the slides that we've been through before about the principles of districting, and also some population statistics that are relevant for us here. And so without—
I'm sorry, excuse me, Brian, Madam Clerk or Madam Assistant Clerk, can you allow me to share my screen?
Yes, you should be all set now, Brittany.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
So just to recap, again, moving on to the next slide, our experience over the years, we're pleased to have been working with Santa Fe and the state for over 30 years in redistricting. In fact, for the city of Santa Fe, we staffed this process, assisting first the city council in the pre-change to the charter days, and then working with the independent commission in the last two go-arounds. And so we're pleased to be assisting you again. To recap the meetings that have taken place and the overall process, if we were to move on to the next slide, to inform the public that first you held an organizational meeting where we went over a general overview of population statistics for Santa Fe and the changes over the past decade. Then two education and directive meetings where Research and Polling presented concepts, not firm plans, but concepts for your consideration. We showed those plans. The public and the commission had an opportunity for input. And now we're moving to the public meetings phase, where once again, show initial concepts that you have reviewed, get commission feedback and public feedback. Then there'll be at least 3 more public meetings, and those will be face-to-face. This will probably be the last Zoom meeting and the first one where we seek public input and additional commission input. And then ultimately you'll adopt a plan. So that's pretty much on the process, a quick recap. On the next slide, just to remind the public of what redistricting is, that basically when you redistrict a city council, what you're doing is you're adjusting the election district boundaries to account for any population shifts that may have occurred. Basically, it's the way in which we change districts to determine who will represent us among the elected officials, whether it be city councilors or legislators, county commissions, school boards. They're all going through this process at different timeframes to satisfy state law. And the state law and the federal law requires that this be done every 10 years after the decennial census. Why is it done then? Well, because that's when the census data are most fresh. And so it's done after the census data has been reported, which occurred last year. But the Santa Fe City Charter is a little unique in that it allows for redistricting more than once per decade. And so Santa Fe actually did redistrict in 2015. As well as in 2011. The reason the city of Santa Fe redistricted in 2015 was because Santa Fe annexed 13,200 people in 2014. So the city council amended the ordinance and called for the redistricting of the city after the annexation took place. So to remind us all of the basic principles of redistricting, there are 5 of them. Equal population among the districts, protect minority voting rights, contiguity, compactness, and communities of interest. Basically, different types of governmental entities have different standards for equal population. We'll talk about how that affects city council districts in a moment. Minority voting rights come out of the Voting Rights Act, Section 2, call for not diluting the voting strength of protected minority groups. Contiguity simply means that the precincts must be contiguous within a district. Precincts are the building blocks for districting. They're also the geography from which we run our elections. Compactness, keep the districts looking tight. Circles, squares, rectangles. What you don't want is a district that looks like a snake or a pencil. You want the districts to be compact. Usually you know it when you see it. Of course, you all are working within the limitations of the perimeter boundaries of the city, which are sometimes not very compact. And then you can take into account communities of interest, basically our shared values or interests, whether they be economic, social, racial, or ethnic. What do people have in common? Do you try to preserve those special interests into single districts so that the people within that district could elect a candidate of their choice? On the next slide, we talk about population. So the city of Santa Fe has a population, according to the 2020 census, of 87,505 people. Well, what's the ideal population of a district? That's simple math. You divide the population of the city by 4 districts. Now, Santa Fe actually has 8 city councilors, of course, but there are 4 city council districts, each with 2 city councilors who are elected in staggered terms. So the ideal population of a district is 21,876. Moving on. But you're allowed some leeway in that ideal population among the districts. The courts have basically said, as long as the population is substantially equal. And the way that's interpreted in state law is that each district shall have a deviation of no more than plus or minus 5% from the ideal population of a district. And so in all the plans that were initially conceptualized for you and developed, the deviations between the districts never vary by more than plus or minus 5. Now, when you're talking about a substantially equal population among the districts, there we're looking at the total population of the district. The adults, the kids, military personnel who live in Santa Fe personally, students in dormitories, whatever. Everyone gets counted when it comes to calculating total population and looking at the deviation. So if the ideal population is 21,800 and you have a leeway of plus or minus 5%, you can see there that the range would be between 20,700 approximately and 22,900 in the range that we're shooting for between the districts. We talked for a moment about not diluting the minority voting strength coming out of the Voting Rights Act. There are protected groups within the Voting Rights Act, and they do include Native Americans, African Americans, Hispanics, and Asians. And basically, this becomes a very hot issue in places like Clovis, New Mexico, or Hobbs, New Mexico, where oftentimes there's a block of voters who sometimes vote against a protected minority group. And we have to focus even more on creating majority Hispanic or Native American districts in places where there's sufficient population to do so. Santa Fe has a long, proud history of not having Anglo-Bloc voting prevent Hispanics from electing candidates of their choice. But still, we're very conscious to look at the communities of interest and to build plans that have at least 2 or have 2 majority Hispanic voting age districts. So when you're looking at voting strength, you look at the adult population, the percent Hispanic adult population. And when you're looking at total population, as I said, you count all adults. So you give minority population an opportunity to elect a candidate of their choice. At the same time, on the next slide, you don't want to racially gerrymander, which would be building race-based districts in subordination of traditional districting principles. Here in all of the concepts that you've reviewed thus far and that we're showing the public, all of the plans or concepts are built on districts that make sense, or at least should be considered for making sense for the community. And then 2 adult Hispanic districts emerge from that without having to racially gerrymander and build districts that don't conform to communities of interest. On the next slide, we talked about already compactness and not compact. The shape on the right shows you a congressional district in Texas. Obviously, that's not compact. There might be some point contiguity, one point in space, but it's not a compact district as compared to the Northern District in New Mexico, a congressional district, which may be large, but it takes that many people to build 1/3 of the population of the state. Contiguity on the next slide is simply on the right-hand side. District A is not contiguous because there are 2 islands in that district. You must have a district such as on the left-hand side where there's no separate islands among the districts. They're all, you could walk that district, so to speak, or drive your car without leaving it. The next slide, communities of interest. That's the one most people ask questions about. What the heck is a community of interest? Well, it's all other factors that may be considered when drawing districts. A group or an area with shared characteristics, neighborhoods, cultural, language, historical traditions, geographic boundaries, lived experiences. So it's in the public hearings that oftentimes you'll hear from the community that, oh, my neighborhood is a strong community of interest. I don't want it split between 4 different districts, or certain major thoroughfares are good dividing lines. Those are the type of things you might hear when people decide what their community of interest is. Maintaining the core of existing districts can be considered a community of interest. Respecting political subdivisions, like avoiding splitting precincts. Santa Fe gained many, many new precincts over the last 10 years. The precincts are the building blocks of districting. They're the building blocks of elections. And so we do avoid precinct splits, and it's possible to draw good plans that stay within substantially equal population limits without splitting precincts. However, there are many precincts in Santa Fe that go beyond the city boundaries and into the county. So we just stick with that portion of the precinct that's contained within the city limits. Also, you can take into account incumbents' residential location if you so chose, and that's considered by the courts a traditional districting principle for your consideration. The city charter on the next slide actually prioritizes the principles of districting from the ordinance perspective, and the charter actually, and sets this in priority order for you to consider. Equal population. There we stuck within the ±5, as we talked about. Minority voting rights. There we always maintain 2 adult Hispanic majority districts in all concepts. Communities of interest, specifically mentioned within the ordinance, is ethnic and economic factors shall be preserved in single districts wherever reasonable. Compactness and contiguity is mentioned, and then compensating for undercounted minorities, that's 5th in the priority list according to the charter. The courts have made it clear that you have to use the census data with all of its weaknesses, but that doesn't mean you can't, in the consideration of the drawing of the plans, take certain things into account. And as I said, we're careful in all the plans to have 2 majority Hispanic adult districts. Now, why am I not speaking about Native Americans or Asians or Hispanic or Native Americans or African Americans? Because their population is distributed more equally, and it's not possible to build a majority district that is of other racial groups. And so the only groups where we could get up to a majority among the protected groups in the Voting Rights Act would be the Hispanics. That's a very different situation in San Juan County and McKinley County, where you can build Native American majority districts quite easily. Now, we talked about that there are tensions between these principles that you might say to us, well, let's get that population deviation down from ±5% to ±4%. Well, and that's fine. That's something you could consider. What if there's this neighborhood that you're trying to keep intact? Sometimes that will impact compactness or make a district get a little closer to that ±5%. So keeping neighborhoods intact could affect compactness, could affect equal population and the like. And so there's no right or wrong there. It comes down to what the priorities are, but at least the city ordinance does make certain priorities for you. Also within the ordinance on the next slide, the commission says, the ordinance says that the commission may assign appropriate weight. You would decide what that weight is to minimizing precinct splits. We already talked about that. We've got lots of building blocks compared to 10 years ago. And then you also may assign the appropriate weight to minimizing voter confusion and switching elected officials into different districts. That's quoted directly out of the ordinance. So you may take into account the confusion that may arise by districting a city councilor outside his or her current district. This population statistics for those members of the public who haven't listened into the videotapes that are on the city website already. So over the last decade, the city of Santa Fe has changed its population. It's added 19,700 people approximately, a change of 29%. So this includes, though, the 13,200 people who were annexed into the city in 2014. So it's not as if Santa Fe really grew by this tremendous margin. It did grow by 19,000, but 13,000 of that 19,000 was the annexation of just expanding the boundaries of the city limits, primarily in the southern part of, exclusively in the southern part of Santa Fe. So those people, those 13,200 people were accounted for in the 2015 redistricting process. So on the next slide, we can see that here's the population change since the annexation and since after the 2015 city redistricting. So 6,400 new people have been added to the city, so to speak, after the last districting and after the last annexation is accounted for. We talked about ideal population of a district, and we talked about needing to be within plus or minus 5% of that ideal population. Here's the current districts with the 2020 census data. And you see that District 4 is 12.6% higher deviation than the ideal population. It's 12% too large from the ideal. Districts 3 and 5 are just right outside the low end of that plus or minus 5%. They need to add population at a minimum. District 1 happens to fall within the right deviation. Doesn't mean the district boundaries couldn't be changed. It just simply means that when you're looking at where the growth was after that annexation, it was in District 4 primarily. All areas grew a little, but some just didn't keep pace with the population growth of the city. To look at the racial ethnic statistics, here we go to adult population rather than total population for the reasons that I mentioned earlier. And we see that 46% of the adults in Santa Fe are Hispanic, 46% of the whites. Now, using 2010 census data after the annexation, the percent Hispanic adult population was 49.3%. So if you look at it that way, the percent Hispanics actually dropped a little post-annexation. There are race and ethnic distributions of the population. Here we see a color-coded map where the darker the color, the higher the proportion of Hispanics in any given precinct. So this is precinct level data. And so if you look at southwestern portions of the city of Santa Fe, you see the Tierra Contenta area, and then areas both north of it, north of Airport Road and south of Tierra Contenta, you see the highest concentrations of Hispanics, with the darkest color being 75 to 100% Hispanic, the next color gradation 50% to 74.5% Hispanic. And so this gives you a good sense for the racial and ethnic population distribution within the city of Santa Fe, and where there are higher concentrations of Anglo, Caucasian population, and Hispanic. Now notice, Brittany will point out on the cursor, St. Francis Road, there's no precincts east of St. Francis Drive in which the majority of adults are Hispanic. That doesn't mean there aren't many that are 20, 30, 40% Hispanic, but in terms of getting up to majority Hispanic. So we see that population distribution. And we also see that So this concentration of higher Hispanic in that Tierra Contenta area, north and south of it, and then a ribbon going up Cerrillos Road as well. So now we touch on the current districts in Santa Fe. And without getting into too much detail, first of all, we observe that these districts, again, were adopted by the 2015 Redistricting Commission, taking into account the annexation of 2014. As you know, Santa Fe has 4 districts with dual members. So there are 8 city councilors elected to staggered term. In any one election, let's take District 1, for example, 2 councilors. One will be up in one election cycle, and then 2 years later, the other city councilor in District 1 will be represented. So the objective there was for good government reasons, that you would never lose 2 city councilors in a district in the same election cycle. They're staggered, and the same thing works with the other districts. The city is bordered by I-25 to the south. So they don't have that population south of I-25. And also the village of La Fria is not within the city of Santa Fe. So that's excluded from your calculations. The boundaries stay on the major thoroughfares and physical features. And as you see in districts 3 and 4, that they're somewhat consistent with the racial patterns of Santa Fe, enabling both districts to be an adult majority Hispanic under all of our plans, even though the percent Hispanic has dropped a little in the city post-annexation. So District 1 pretty much covers the northern part of the city of Santa Fe, bordered by East Alameda Street and the Santa Fe River and Cerrillos Road going down to Siler. So it's a district, it's pretty much looked similar to this over the years, the 90s and 2000s. District 2 also has a similar look because really there hasn't been as much population shift there. So District 2 covers southeastern side of the city of Santa Fe. The border between Districts 1 and 2 are also East Alameda Street, the Santa Fe River, and Cerrillos Road. Also, the border between Districts 2 and 4 is roughly Yucca and Llano. And District 2 includes all those neighborhoods off of Old Pecos Trail, off of Old Santa Fe Trail, the neighborhoods across from St. Francis and St. Michael's Drive, and the neighborhood south of the state capitol building. District 3 covers the southwest side of Santa Fe, and it includes the Tierra Contenta area, the areas north and south of Airport Road, south of Tierra Contenta, as I say, and also the airport. And District 4 covers portions of southern Santa Fe between Yucca and Cerrillos Road. It also includes areas crossing over Cerrillos Road to pick up those neighborhoods between Jemez Road and Siler Road. That's pretty much a recap of the current districts in Santa Fe. And without further ado at this point, Brittany is going to recap the concepts and also some additional information that you have requested since the last meeting.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Brian. Good evening, commissioners. So you've seen all of these concepts, but we're just going to run through them briefly for the public and talk about the changes that we're proposing in each of these concepts. So I'm going to share my screen and open the maps. So this is the first concept. We're calling this Concept A. You can see it looks really similar to the current districts. This is sort of a least change plan. And I'm going to put on the current boundaries, which are these green and white lines here. And so all that we've changed in Concept A, if you'll recall, District 4 was a little too large and needed to shrink, and Districts 2 and 3 were a little too small and need to grow. So between District 4 and District 2, we moved the boundary here. It was along St. Francis, and we moved it to Yucca. So there's only one precinct that moves from District 4 into District 2, and that was enough to equalize the population in District 2. And then between District 3 and District 4, we're sort of playing around with these neighborhoods north of Airport Road. So this here is Airport Road, and this street right here is Rafina. And the current boundaries are along Jemez. between Agua Fria and Airport. And so what we've done in Concept A is we've taken these two precincts north of Rafina from District 4 and put them in District 3. And that was enough to equalize the population between District 3 and District 4. Concept A does not parry any incumbents and retains 2 Hispanic majority voting age population districts in 3 and 4. The next concept that we've developed for your consideration is A1, which is obviously sort of a flavor of A. I'm going to zoom out so we can see this a little better. So we have in Concept A1 made the same change between District 2 and District 4 along Yucca. And I should note in Concept A and A1, District 1 doesn't change at all. As you'll recall, it was within that plus or minus 5% allowable deviation. And so in these concepts, in these lease change plans, we didn't change any of the boundaries with District 1. But here in A1, we again make the same change we made in Concept A, which is to take that 1 precinct from District 4 and put it in District 2. What is a little different in A1 is how we handle the boundary between District 3 and District 4. So rather than just taking these 2 precincts north of Rafina, we wanted to see what it would be like to keep these neighborhoods, both north and south of Rafina, together. And so we took District 3 north of Airport all the way to, there's a sort of fence line that separates these 2 neighborhoods. And so these 2 precincts here north of Airport stay in District 4, and these other precincts move into District 3. Now that ended up being a little bit too much population, and so we needed to bring a little more population into District 4 from District 3. And so we chose this precinct here, Precinct 116. And this is just east of Ortiz Elementary, which is right here. And this includes some mobile home communities, some commercial real estate, including the auditor's office. There's a UPS and a FedEx in here, some car dealerships. And we felt like Precinct 116 was a different flavor than sort of the rest of District 3, these sort of Tierra Contenta precincts. And so we felt like that was a good swap there. And so that is Concept A1. And then we have yet another flavor of A, which is A2, which again, we're sort of trying to see what would happen if we do different things between District 3 and District 4. So in Concept A2, District 1 again remains unchanged. District 2 is just picking up that 1 precinct to hold the boundary straight along Yucca between District 2 and District 4. I'm going to turn on the current boundaries. And so here what we've done is, rather than taking District 3 all the way east to that sort of fence line, we kept 1 precinct south of Rafina in District 4. And that Precinct 116 stays in District 3. But to equalize the population, we took this, I'm going to zoom out just a little bit. We took this Precinct 62 from District 3 to District 4. So the current boundaries are held along Cerrillos all the way to I-25. Under this plan, under A2, we held the boundary of District 4 along this arroyo here that's south of Capitol High School. These are, sort of larger lots. They're a little bit different than what you see in the rest of District 3. And so we felt like this was another sort of good option to equalize the population between District 3 and District 4. Okay, the next concept we're calling Concept B, and it is sort of more of a little less minimal change. So what we've done in Concept B is we sort of thought, what would it look like to hold Airport Road and Rodeo Road as a boundary between District 4 and District 3? So rather than having this sort of vertical orientation between Districts 3 and 4, let's see what it looks like to have a vertical orientation. So all of the neighborhoods north of Airport and Rodeo are together in District 4, and all of the neighborhoods south of Airport and Rodeo are in District 3. And District 3 pushes a little east from Yucca, goes all the way to St. Francis. So follows Rodeo, and then this is Zia here. So District 2, because it's losing a little bit east of Yucca, ends up coming a little west north of Rodeo into District 4. Under Concept B, again, District 1 is not, doesn't have any changes from the current boundaries. This does pair the incumbents, all 4 incumbents from District 3 and District 4 in District 3. And so there are no sitting incumbents in District 4 in Plan B. It doesn't affect the incumbents from District 1 or District 2. Even under this configuration, though, and as you might expect, given what Brian was showing in the sort of distribution of the Hispanic voting age population, District 3 and District 4 are still majority Hispanic voting age population districts. And then the final concept for your consideration so far is concept C, which again is a little more, it's a little more than minimal change plan. And the idea here was, let's see what happens if we do a little bit different horizontal orientation of District 1 and District 3. And, how can we rethink District 1 a little bit? So what this looks like is District 4 follows Airport Road like in concept B, but then goes up Cerrillos and moves from Seiler to Baca Street and takes everything north of Airport and Cerrillos. District 3 stays south of Cerrillos and south of Airport, and again pushes a little further, comes to Yucca, and then doesn't go quite so far into District 3. So the sort of northern part here doesn't go all the way to Yucca, but it does take both sides of Rodeo Road, which is sort of nice because that allows District 3 to keep all of those retail areas, including Target and Sam's Club, and keeping that all whole in District 3. What happens to District 1 here is it becomes sort of a central Santa Fe district. So it goes from the northeastern part of the city down past the Capitol, all the way to St. Michael's Drive between the railroad tracks and Old Pecos. And so it's taking the neighborhood south of the Capitol, those historic neighborhoods like Don Gaspar and Galisteo, go into District 1. And then District 2 pushes a little west to account for losing that population there along Alameda. So those are the plans currently under consideration. And when we met last time, we had a little bit of a discussion about compactness, and that wasn't something we had sort of put into the statistics. And so if it's all right with you, Madam Chair, I can talk a little bit about the compactness of each of these concepts and just talk a little bit sort of generally about compactness and how to interpret the scores. So I'm going to pull up just a really brief little PowerPoint. So there's a lot of measures of compactness. And, as Brian said, compactness is really about sort of the shape of the district. And does it look like a pencil or does it look more like a circle or a square? There are actual sort of mathematical ways to measure compactness. And there's a lot of them, but this, I want to show you two, Polsby-Popper and Rioch. And these are generally sort of widely accepted versions of compactness. And I wanted to show you two, just to show you the variability. So there really, you can't measure all facets of compactness. It's hard to sort of get your arms around this slippery concept. And so I wanted to show you two different versions of the measure so that you can see how they differ and sort of what their strengths and weaknesses are, because they really do measure sort of different facets of compactness. So the first is Polsby-Popper, and this is really a measure of the contours of the district. So mathematically, what we're looking at is comparing the area of the district to the area of a circle with the circumference that's equal to the perimeter of the district. So the more sort of little contours in your district, the wider, the longer that perimeter is going to be and the bigger the circle is going to be. And so we're looking at that ratio. And both of these scores go from 0 to 1, with 1 being the most compact and 0 being the least compact. Rioch is a little bit different. It's sort of more of a measure of the dispersion of the district, like how snake-like is the district. So mathematically what this is it compares the area of the district to the area of the smallest circle in which the district can fit. So you can see that in the little figure. So, you know, I said these go from 0 to 1. And so what is a good score? It's hard to say objectively what a good score is for several reasons. One of which is because different measures of compactness are sensitive to different things. So for example, Polsby-Popper is really sensitive to physical geography. So if there's a border along a river, or if the map resolution is really, really good, you'll have sort of a lower Polsby-Popper score. REAC is sensitive to the orientation of a district's extremities. So for example, having a coiled snake, you might have a higher score than a straight snake because the extremities are sort of further away from each other. So for example, if we have a district that follows major roads, but has a precinct or two that juts out to encompass a community of interest, REAC might be low and Polsby-Popper might be a little bit higher because it's following those straight roads, but it sort of has a little bit of an extremity to get a community of interest. So if the Polsby-Popper score and REAC score are different from each other, that's not necessarily cause for concern. Context is really important, and being cognizant of what the measures are sensitive to is really important. So it's good to look at both measures because they measure different things. So these are the average Polsby-Popper and REAC scores for each of the conceptual plans that we've drawn, as well as the current district. But I also just want to note that here you can see an outline of the city of Santa Fe with no districts drawn, and you can see that the boundaries of the city itself are pretty non-compact. So there's a lot of sort of contouring that might drive down the Polsby-Popper score. And there's some jutting pieces, especially in the north part off of District 1, that are going to drive down the REAC score. So it's hard to separate the compactness issues resulting from the perimeter of the city from those resulting from how the district is drawn. So that's just something to keep in mind. But you know, comparing the scores to each other across plans has some utility. So for example, you can see here that the average Polsby-Popper score for A and A1, as well as the average REAC score, are higher than for any of the other conceptual plans. And C has the lowest score on both of these measures. So we can say that, you know, A is more compact than C, and then A2 and B fall somewhere in the middle. So that's just sort of a quick overview of compactness, and we'll share that slideshow so you can actually spend some time with the numbers if that's helpful for you all. One other thing, Madam Chair, if I may, that we just wanted to mention is we were at the last meeting, Mr. Padilla from the city's GIS department shared with us this really great map that shows the pending sort of building that's going to be happening in the city. And so we just wanted to sort of highlight that. You all have this, it was emailed to you, but we just want to highlight, you know, where most of the growth is going to happen, you know, in the very near future. And a lot of it is happening south of Airport and Rodeo Road. And so you can see here in Tierra Contenta, and you can see here sort of east of Cerrillos and south of Rodeo, there's a lot of new construction happening and being planned. And so this is something to keep in mind as you're thinking about and sort of weighing which concepts sort of make sense for the city is, you know, where are we going to see some population increases over the next decade? So just wanted to highlight that for you all as well. And Madam Chair, I think that was it for us.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Brian, for that recap of all of that great information we've looked at before. It's always useful, I believe, to review it again. We always continue to learn. And I so appreciate the information regarding the growth, where it's going to happen, because we know it's happening, and it's good to have you pinpoint exactly where it is occurring, because that is very relevant to the work at hand. And then I appreciate also that that comparison of the compaction in the city. I appreciate that chart. I love spreadsheets. So okay. Anything else, Brian, that we need to know from you all?
No, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you. So that takes us to, Madam City Clerk, to the next item, the public comment. And I'm imagining that you're going to coordinate that and tell us how that's going to work in terms of any people that are ready to speak, or also any public comment that has been written. Tell us how that's all going to be presented.
Yes, Madam Chair. So what we'll do is we do have an individual joining our meeting. We'll allow them to join. I can also put them into kind of, it's hard to explain, but I can promote them in so they can turn on their video if you'd like, or they can be allowed to speak, whatever your preference is. And then our assistant city clerk can also walk through the public comment our office has received. It's already been distributed to commission members, but we're happy to just note that public comment has been, we've received some public comment written.
Okay, wonderful. Go ahead and promote them to allow them to be seen if they're willing to do that. That's certainly their choice. So go ahead and do that, and then
so I did send a request for that, and then I also asked for them to unmute. So sounds like they unmuted.
Christine, I don't know if you're talking about me. I'm Laura Hendry. I'm just, I'm one of those floaters. I'm just listening to you guys, but I have no comments to make. I'm just watching the whole thing.
You are, and your name changed on the screen.
Oh,
so
sorry. Yeah.
It's okay. That's what made me assume that you were public comment, was because
Right.
it doesn't have your name on there anymore. So
Sorry. Yeah.
no worries. There we go. So, Madam Chair, that was the only individual in our attendee room, and I will defer to Geraldine at this time if she just wants to know the number of comments we've received so far.
there is
Madam Chair,
another gentleman that we see, Mr. Weber. Is he going to be providing a comment? Jeff Weber, I see him on my screen.
Yes, I had solicited, a public comment. I provided that. I'm the alternate actually for District 1. And so I've been following the presentations and just had one thought, as I've been listening to everything, and I submitted a written comment earlier today. I don't know if anyone had the opportunity to read that or not.
Yeah, some of us got it. I'm hoping all of us got it, but you're certainly welcome, Mr. Weber, to read it if you would like to.
Okay, well, thank you very much. I'll go ahead and read it. Although a minor consideration, projected relative growth of the districts could be considered in drawing a draft concept outline. Under such a scenario, high growth districts would have negative deviations from the ideal population of the district, and low growth districts would have a positive deviation. This would make it more likely that districts would remain within the plus or minus 5% of their ideal population until the next decade's redistricting exercise, and thereby make district representation more equitable over time. The Commission may wish to consider asking its consultants if it is feasible to provide an alternative concept D that follows the federal and state guidelines, respects the precinct outlines, does not force existing district commissioners into another district, takes into consideration future relative growth while utilizing major road boundaries, and on a very limited but thoughtful basis, moves district boundaries away from major roads as necessary to accomplish this. So my only thought here is when I was looking at the priorities of principles, the number one was equal population. And going forward, we saw, looking backwards, we saw that one of the districts basically ended up at 12+%, which basically meant that there was probably underrepresentation of that district. And if we go forward, basically, and we have those areas of growth that are negative deviations, they're unlikely to go into a greater than 5% population. So this is a very complex exercise that's been engaged in. I think the consultants have done a wonderful job. It's, it's amazing what they've come up with. But I was just wondering, is it necessary, and I don't think it is, to place such an emphasis on the major roads if it hurts us in accomplishing more of equal representation as we look at the projected growth going into the future? So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Weber. Do we have any other individuals that will be speaking? Doesn't look like it. And I don't know if Mr. Sanderoff has any information that will be useful in response to Mr. Weber's comments. If that's appropriate, if you'd like to share some information. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Commissioners, and alternate member, Commissioner Weber. Yes, so to recap what we heard, and Mr. Weber, you can confirm if I'm recapping it correctly. In those areas, in those districts where we anticipate significant growth over the next decade, as laid out in the data that we received from the city of Santa Fe, that you're recommending that those districts, which would be particularly districts 3 and especially districts 4, since a lot of the growth is going to be in the south end of Santa Fe, that we develop additional alternatives that keep on the plus or minus 5% deviation from the ideal population, keep those deviations on the low end of 5% to anticipate future growth, and be a little less concerned, if necessary, with the major thoroughfares, if that's what it takes to get to that higher negative deviation to account for future growth. And so if that was correct, I also heard you make statements about avoiding pairing incumbents and working off of the concept, the A's, if you will, if I heard you correctly. And so that's what the request would be, to try to get the deviations lower on districts 3 and 4, especially 4, and see what that does to the compactness and the boundaries between those districts. Would that be a fair recap?
Yes, sir, I think it is.
Okay. So, Madam Chair and Commissioners, the ordinance speaks to that, and our role is to serve you. If you as a group feel that you want to send us back to the drawing board and make those adjustments to try to get the deviations lower on the anticipated high growth area districts, we can do it. We can give it a shot, and then at the next public meeting, show those plans. It would be up to the commission to decide whether they want to move forward and ask us to do that.
Okay. Anything further on that, Mr. Sandra, Brian?
No, Brittany, do you have anything to add?
I think so. I would just say that I do think that's a good exercise, especially given how much growth we expect in those districts. It might be useful to just see what would happen and what that would look like.
Right, and you even have a tangential issue, which is some of the concepts split that area, the high growth area, between 2 districts, and other concepts have all of that high growth area in the same district, and that could compound that issue. But we could try it with the A's and see if we can draw still compact districts that are relatively on thoroughfares and yet keeping the negative deviations down closer to 3, 4, or 5 in those high growth areas. Similarly, then what would happen is the areas of slow growth, they will end up being on the high end of 5%. Simple math tells you if you're going to be keeping a couple districts on the low end of 5%, the other districts are going to be on the high end of 5%. But one could argue that's okay because they're slow growth areas anyway.
Okay, I see Commissioner Grazier has his hand raised. Now, I know there's another public comment that we need to listen to. I'm not sure whether we probably should listen to all the comments and then have discussion from the commissioners. But it's, since I know we just have one more comment, right? Is that correct? Let's go ahead and just stay on topic. And that way we can finish this up. So Commissioner Grace, you have your hand raised.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. So I had actually brought up this issue at a prior meeting Mr. Weber brought up, and I would like to at least see what that would look like if we could take a crack at that adjustment, because it seems pretty clear that there are high growth and low growth areas of the city.
Okay. Any other comments, commissioners? So I probably should get a motion and a vote on this so that we know that we're all in agreement that this is something that we should ask our consultant to do this additional work. So Mr. Grazier, would you like to make a motion and vote on this?
Yes.
And do we need to clarify, Mr. Sanderoff, what it is that you would be presenting if this motion passes?
Madam Chair, Commissioners, I don't think so. We would follow. The motion would be to adjust the population of those districts that we anticipate higher population growth. That gives us enough direction to give it a shot.
Okay, so that would be a different concept.
They would probably end up being in the A series. So it might end up being another version of A.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Sanderoff. Commissioner Brechner?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Before a motion is made, I just wanted to raise one other question, and that's anticipating future growth. Of course, the map that the city gave us, or the growth projections, were for projects that are in the pipeline now. And, unfortunately, that might be, 2 to 4 year kind of time frame. And we're looking at what's going to happen 10 years. And I don't have a crystal ball any more than anybody else does. But there are some land areas, I think, outside of present districts 3 and 4, up on the north side of the city that have been proposed for substantial residential development. I don't know whether those numbers, how they match up with what's in the pipeline now, but in projecting future growth, maybe somebody should try to get a sense of things that aren't specifically in the pipeline yet.
I've read some articles in the New Mexican saying that Tierra Contenta is thinking over the decade of 12,000 units, many of which have not even begun in the pipeline. So I would agree with you, Commissioner Brechner, Madam Chair, that there are others happening throughout the district, but there'll be a lot more in the south end of Santa Fe too that are not in the pipeline.
Thank you.
So Commissioner Brechner, are you suggesting to add to the another concept to the potential motion, to have our consultants provide us a different version?
No, Madam Chair, I'm not suggesting that. I think working with the concepts within one is going to be enough. And based on what Mr. Sanderoff just said and reminded us of, that no matter what happens elsewhere, the predominant growth appears to be, from what we know now, in 3 and 4. We'll leave it at that as far as I'm concerned. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Brechner. Commissioner Donato.
Yes, thank you. I was under the impression that 2 points. Number one is that the land use map, which gives us the projections of growth, also included within that projection of growth, not only the ones that were approved, started, approved, not yet started, but also the not yet approved sections, the more yellowy sections of that map. So I think that the city has provided us with a pretty good idea, because the approved, not yet, or not approved areas would bring us out to probably the 7, 8, 9-year timeframe. The second point is that Ms. Poss's consistent comments in the concept maps have, she's taken into account the expected growth in areas 3 and 4, which brought the percentages either very low positive, point something, or in a negative range. So I think that Ms. Poss's presentation did accomplish some of that. Having said that, I would not be averse to having Mr. Sanderoff's group give us an A3, which more deliberately and diligently look at the specific growth areas. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Donato. Mr. Sanderoff, does that fall within the same motion?
Yes, Madam Chair. We understand what you're asking, and we can give it a shot.
Okay, other commissioners, conversations? If not, I would like a motion and a second so that we can vote on that and then give our consultants direction.
Madam Chair?
Mr. Commissioner Grazier.
And I'll second that, Madam Chair.
Okay.
I'd like to make the motion in very broad terms to give the consultants the maximum discretion. So I will move that we request the consultants present one or more maps that take into greater consideration growth and annexation areas.
Growth or annexation areas, okay. Okay.
I'll maintain that second.
Okay. I have a motion. Any further discussion on the motion, commissioners? Madam Commissioner Quintana, did I see you raise your hand? Yes, Commissioner Quintana.
I would just like to add that in honoring Mr. Weber's comments, just in coming up with new concepts, that we do take into account a couple of things that he talked about. And one of them would be the not changing the incumbent, not force existing district commissioners into another district. These different items that he had, that would be in the spirit of taking the public comment and continuing with a new concept, if the commission agrees.
Thank you, Commissioner. Anything else on that? I think that's what all the A series deal with. They deal with not splitting commissioners. So this would be in line with that. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Any other comments? Commissioner Riekers.
Yeah, I wonder if you could do it for concepts B and C as well. I noticed that in particularly concept C, you tended toward the positive rather than the negative, getting closer to +5% rather than -5. And that's a high growth area, and 3 is a high growth area. So I'm just wondering if it would be possible to look at the parallel of 3 and 4, and what would happen if you took into account the high growth area in both of those areas, the high growth possibilities, okay, in both of those areas.
Madam Chair.
Mr. Sanderoff.
Yes, we can try. Yeah. And remember, in some of those concepts, B or C or both, the entire high growth area south of Santa Fe is in the same district.
Mm-hmm.
But that doesn't mean we can't bring that one to the lower end of 5%. So the answer to your question is yes, we can try that.
Okay.
And I'm sorry, Madam Chair and Commissioner Riekers, just so I'm clear, So we would do a version of A, a version of B, and a version of C that has the lower deviation. So that would be 3 new concept maps.
Well, when I look at C, I'm seeing that, let's see. It's a positive 3.3% for 4 and a negative 1 for 3. Both of those are high growth areas. So if we go with what Mr. Weber is suggesting, and I agree with him, I had thought about this in the last week or so, that we take into account where the high growth areas are going to be so that perhaps we can avoid having another redistricting committee within the next 10 years. If we take that into account, just if you can do it, it might be worth looking at.
Sure.
And Commissioner, Madam Chair, Commissioner Riekers, just to make sure we understand, we would take the spirit of concept B and we would take the spirit of concept C and accomplish that objective. We wouldn't be, because the spirit of them is having a district south of Rodeo Road, south of Airport Road. We would maintain that spirit of the concept, but we would get those high growth districts down closer to the -5, -4%. Would that be a fair statement?
It would for me. Is that okay with you, Mr. Weber?
I think he's muted. You're muted, Mr. Weber. I guess the only question I have is my understanding of Mr. Weber's proposal was to maintain city councilors in the districts that they're at and not group them. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, C does that. So I don't know, is it achievable to deal with high growth areas and still separate the councilors in C? Is that a whole nother animal that we're talking about from the first motion? Mr. Sandoval.
Well, Madam Chair, Commissioners, if you have a concept B, if you have a District 3 that's primarily south of Airport and Rodeo Road, and then you just try to lower its deviation, you're going to still end up pairing 4 councilors.
Right. And so that's why I'm asking, does that, I think that if I understood, that might go counter to the original motion and might go counter to what Mr. Weber is indicating. Mr. Brechner has his hand up. I don't know if it's on that point. But first, Commissioner Riekers, did you finish saying everything you needed to say? I don't want to cut you off.
No, I think I'm voicing some support for B and C, but I would like to see how the growth would impact those 2 districts if we got them closer to the negative side rather than the positive, as they are pretty much now.
So, Madam Chair, Commissioner Riekers, even if they're paired, is that what you're saying? Even if the 4 councilors are paired, do you want to see it, or just trying to understand?
Even if the 4 councilors ended up in the same district, is that what you're asking me?
Yes.
Yes, I would like to see that. Yes. If you can separate, okay, that's one thing. But I think to do that, you do need the parallel vertical orientation of the districts. If you make it horizontal, I can see that there is a problem with the 4 incumbents. And I understand, I heard you say that this had happened before in 1990. And I admit that I was not here then, so I'm not familiar with what the entire controversy was over that. I understand there was a great deal of controversy. So I think I need to stop right there and just ask if you can do that.
Thank you, Commissioner Riekers, on that information. I really think I'm hearing that as a separate motion than what we're talking about.
Okay.
So I'd like to continue the conversation on this motion and the second, and then if we need to and act on that, and if we need to do something additional, Commissioner Rickers, if you will share that after, but Commissioner Brechner has a comment. I'm not sure what it's on. Mr. Brechner, Commissioner Brechner.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, it's on the topic, and what we haven't really done as a group yet is address issues that we might have with the 5 proposals in front of us, forgetting about this specific change. And some of us, I'll speak for myself, I have certain issues with the B and C proposals beyond the fact that it consolidates counselors, four counselors into one district. Relating to some of the boundary lines, and maybe to Mr. Weber's point, using roads arbitrarily without necessarily, as dividing lines without necessarily taking into account communities of interest. So, and we do have time perhaps to look at B and C further, and maybe at this point do the first review and see what it says, and then at a later time we could look at Commissioner Recker's thoughts and perhaps go to B and C at a later time. That's just, I'm throwing that out there for now. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Any other comments from commissioners on the motion that's before us? I have a motion made by Grazier and seconded by Donato. Any further conversations on that motion? I don't want to confuse ourselves or confuse our consultants in terms of what we expect from them at the next meeting. Further comments? Commissioner Brechner, your hand is still up. You still need, no, okay. Okay, shall we have a vote, Madam Clerk? Assistant Clerk, will you call roll on the motion made by Commissioner Grazier and seconded by Donato regarding adjusting the population and the higher growth districts? I'll kind of summarize that, not quite sure it captures it all, but.
Yes, Commissioner Brechner,
Yes.
Commissioner Donato,
Yes.
You have to speak the cats, okay?
Commissioner Grazier,
Yes.
Commissioner Mckenzie,
Yes.
Chair Ortiz,
Yes.
Commissioner Quintana,
Yes.
Commissioner Rickers.
Yes.
Motion is passed.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you for the motion. Thank you for the second and the conversation. Mr. Sandroff, that gives you more work to do for next meeting. And thank you, Mr. Weber, for your comments and your insight, and for helping us look at different things that might help us achieve the best possible decision when we get to the end of our journey here. So anything further on that point? I know we still have one more public comment. Commissioners, anything further? Assistant City Clerk Cardenas, could you give us the last, I guess you're going to read it. Is that what's going to happen? Yeah, please.
Sure, Madam Chair, I'll read it. Okay, this is a comment that came in via email. It says, Redistricting Commission, there should be 8 districts, not 4, to give a fair representation in each area. Folks living along Alameda and Agua Fria have different needs than folks living in the Jaguar area. Similar, people living south of Rodeo Road have different viewpoints than those living on the north end of the district. And this was submitted by Randall Kippenbrock.
Okay, thank you. Do you have any others? That's it, correct?
That is it so far.
Okay. So so we'll just make note of those 2 comments. I doubly we need to respond to them. It's always nice when we have people in person that ask us questions, because then we can really understand what they're presenting. Mr. Sandroff, yes.
Madam Chair, Commissioners, just in reference to that comment, which we've heard before, but the city charter specifically says that Santa Fe shall have 4 dual member districts. And so I think that would take a charter change to create 8 single member districts.
Yes, it would. And it would be the duty of a different committee, not a commission, not this one. That's correct. So thank you for that insight. Okay, so those are our public comments. matters for the commission. This is an opportunity for commissioners to have that conversation as Commissioner Riker started in terms of other things to do. And if we want to move forward to ask our consultants to do anything additional. It's also an opportunity to let us know which of the concepts you're interested in that you want to move forward with. It's just our time to have a conversation about where we are with them. So I'm going to open the floor up for anyone that wants to ask clarifying information from our consultants or to give any of their thoughts regarding the current plans, or we've already asked for an additional change. So anyway, I'm sorry, I didn't see which hand went up first, but I'll call on Commissioner Donato.
Yes, thank you. First off, I'd like to thank Ms. Poss on the compactness reporting. I know Professor Polsby and Professor Popper very well, and so we've had those discussions in detail, sometimes painful, but other times over a good glass of wine. The other pending question that I had for you from last meeting was the impact on concept C with regard to that punch out area where 4 goes into 1, and what would be the economic impact on either 1 or 4 or both with regard to that change.
And Madam Chair and Commissioner Donato, we're still sort of trying to figure out the best data to use for that. And so I hope we can revisit that in future meetings. Also, I hope that maybe we can have a glass of wine and you can talk to me about Polsby and Popper.
Thank you very much. And open invitation. But thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Donato. Commissioner Brechner.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is just a point of clarification. The city code, and I don't have the citation of the section, I could spend some time looking for it, but it has a definitions of the precincts that are in each district presently. And city code has a total of 7 precincts shown in the present District 3. And I just used that one because it was the smallest number for review of that. And the map that was provided by Research and Polling shows 16 precincts in District 3. And I further checked, I found a map from 2015 based on, I believe, the redistricting that occurred then. And that map showed the same 7 precincts that are shown in present city code in District 3. And I just wondered if there's an explanation for that variance, either from Research and Polling or from our city attorney who's with us. Thank you.
Brittany, you want to take that?
Sure, Madam Chair and Commissioner Brechner, yes, there is absolutely an explanation. So state law requires that precincts be split at certain times. So if there are more, and I might get this not quite right, but it has to do with the number of votes cast in previous elections. So if there's more than, Brian, remind me, 750 votes cast, the precinct has to be split. Or if there's more than 2,500 people in the precinct, then that precinct has to be split. And so following the 2020 election and then following the release of the 2020 census data, we did a review of all of the precincts, and those precincts that were over that threshold of 750 votes cast or 2,500 people in the precinct, we split those. So that's why in the previous redistricting processes in 2010 and 2015, there were a different number of precincts because we've added precincts since then.
So Madam Chair and Commissioner Donato, these are the new official precincts of Santa Fe County, which are different from what you may have seen in other documents. And we work with the county commissions. The county commissions are the arbiter of precincts, not the cities. And so we work with the county commission to help them split the precincts. And then we are using the most up-to-date precincts that will be used in the election for 2023.
Thank you for that clarification. I appreciate it very much.
Commissioner.
And Madam Chair, Commissioner Brechner, if you are interested, we could send you a sort of spreadsheet of the current districts and their sort of population information, if that's something.
That would be great to send all of us. That would be great
Sure.
to see that. And thank you, Commissioner Brechner. That was a great question. And thank you, Mr. Steinoff and Ms. Poss for the response. You educate us every moment you speak, so thank you. Let's see, commissioners, anyone else have any comments, any proposals, any motions that we need to discuss?
Do we, Madam Chair?
Commissioner Rickers, yes.
Do we need to have a motion to have Mr. Sanderoff and Ms. Poss to do a new map of B and C, or did we decide to drop that for right this moment? Where are we at there?
We are very able to discuss whatever we would like to discuss now. And if you would like to make a motion and have that conversation, that's certainly something you have the ability to do, because guiding our consultants is something that we need to do as one voice. And so we need to understand what's going on. And that's certainly something you are welcome to do if you're ready to do that now, or if you want to wait till the next meeting, that's certainly your option. And I do have other people raising their hands, so that's Commissioner
Okay.
Rickers, would you?
A motion would be fine with me. I would make a motion that they apply the same possible population increase to concepts B and C as were passed in the motion for concept A. The concept A's. Yeah.
Mr. Sanderoff, does that
Madam
create
Chair,
any issues?
commissioners, just to restate to make sure I'm hearing it correctly. So I think you've already adopted a motion to have us try to adjust the populations for the A's, correct? And now we're looking at a possible second motion that might have us do the same thing for concepts B and C. And so if we were to do that and follow the spirit of B and then accomplish the objective, we would be sticking to a District 3 that would be pretty much south of Airport Road and Rodeo Road, but we would bring that district closer to the -5% to anticipate future growth. But it would in all likelihood still pair the counselors. It wouldn't be able to have all the criteria that were in the first motion. It would accomplish the objective of adjusting population due to anticipated growth, but it would probably not solve not change the issue of pairing for incumbents, being that they all live south of Rodeo and Airport Road, which is part of the spirit of concepts B and C.
Yeah.
So it would be under that proviso that we would attempt to adjust the boundaries, but whereas in your first motion, you wanted us to continue to avoid pairing incumbents, as is the case in A's, B's and C's do. And so it would adjust populations, but it still wouldn't solve the incumbent issue. And we could still accomplish it if you want.
Thank you for that clarification, Mr. Sanderoff. Ms. Poss, did you need to add anything to that? Commissioner Grazier, I'm sorry, had his hand raised. Was it on that point, Commissioner Grazier, or was something additional?
I put my hand back down.
Oh, okay.
My mother raised me to know when to keep my mouth shut.
I'd like to meet your mother. She sounds like a really neat lady. Commissioner Rickers, you still have the floor. I don't see any other hands. So it sounds from Mr. Sanderoff says that additional option that would apply the population increases to B and C, they could do that, but it still would split counselors, which was, I don't think the original, which wasn't in Mr. Weber's recommendation, if that's what we're working from. But it's certainly your motion, Commissioner.
Maybe we could discuss how important it is to the commissioners that we maintain the incumbents in other words, maintaining the A's, the concept A's, because it seemed to me that in the list of priorities, not switching, disturbing the incumbents and taking them out of their district was lower on the list of priorities. So I just wonder if we could talk about, does that seem really important to everyone? Perhaps less important to me since I don't have this huge 30-year history here. I don't know. So I'm just wondering, is it something we can discuss?
Absolutely. Okay, Commissioner Grazier, your hand is up.
Yeah, and I think we addressed this a little bit previously. My personal opinion is that as long as we have a reasonable basis for combining incumbents, I find that acceptable. I do put fairly low priority on protecting incumbencies. But I do think we should have some basis for doing it just to avoid the appearance of it being done for political reasons.
Okay. Anyone else would like to weigh in on this? One of my priorities I've already disclosed is the confusion that our voters would have. And so I, for one, unless there's a major compelling reason and to split counselors, I think we have enough options on the table that will allow us to maintain counselors in their districts and work on the plus or minus deviations as necessary. So that's my thinking. Did I see someone else raise their hand?
Yes.
Commissioner Brechner.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I respect that we're exploring all the options, but at the same time, to me, it's just a little premature to look at B and C because I just find them, for various reasons, lower priority, in my personal opinion, than the variations of A and how we might explore how it could be, any of the A concepts might be improved. And so I'd like to see that before we then have lengthy discussions about B and C. And that's my feeling right now. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for those comments. Anyone else would like to share, provide some insight on their position? Is that helpful to you, Commissioner Rikers? There's just two of us that commented on that.
Yeah. Is there anyone else who wants to comment on that? Or it was just...
I keep trying to get you to raise your hands. And Commissioner Rikers, this is something that you can think about and we can bring back again at the next hearing. We have 3 more hearings to deal with. And we might have other options that will come up that will address your concern as well. So Commissioner Donato just raised his hand.
My mother never told me to be quiet. So let's, and I tell my students never be quiet either. As far as the incumbency issue is concerned, I place that on the lowest rung of priority. And there's a couple of reasons for that. Is I'm always one who looks at shaking up the political process, for one. And for two, when we look at incumbency, we're looking at 1 or 2 years into the future, as opposed to growth areas where we look at 7, 8, 9, or 10 years into the future. And so the ability to empower, energize other people to run for political office is a high priority for me. And so I'm never one to protect incumbents, especially when it's a 1 or 2 year term or 2 year terms. So that's just my 2 cents.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Madam Chair, Commissioners, one thing
Sandra.
just for additional information. When we developed the A's, we did it with ignoring where the incumbents lived. We didn't even know where they lived yet.
Ah.
We did it because
Good to
there
know.
are more minimal change plans to account for population shifts. And so it was less likely that they would be paired just because if they happened to live in a certain area and the boundaries didn't change much, they wouldn't be paired. So I just wanted to point that out. The A's were not developed with the intent of protecting incumbents. They were developed to accomplish a certain objective, and coincidentally, none of them were paired. Whereas B and C were designed for a wholly different concept, as we knew you wanted to see alternatives, such as south of Airport Rodeo Road, such as central Santa Fe in this District 1. And those, after we then placed the incumbents' addresses on the maps, we found those pairings. So we just wanted to clarify that.
Thank you, Mr. Sandroff. Anything further from commissioners? Commissioner Reichers, I'm sorry. Is there any?
It's Riekers, it's Riekers.
Riekers, I'm so sorry. I apologize. I apologize to all of the commissioners when I
No worries.
mispronounce your names. Commissioner Riekers.
Yeah, no worries.
Anything further?
Why don't we table this till next meeting, and we can think about it. And I would say to Mr. Sandorov and Ms. Paz, maybe think about if you were to do it. You know, I noticed with the incumbents that two of them are very close to the border to the south, and two of them are. And they're closer to the north border and to the west, I believe is how I would say it. And it's possible that one or two of them could be cut out and we could preserve, you know, a couple of incumbent or one incumbent or something. Might just think about it. And we'll just think, we can talk about it maybe next week, next meeting in 2 weeks.
2 weeks. Thank you, Commissioner. We don't need to table because there's no motion before us, but we certainly can put a pin in it and you can bring that conversation up accordingly. So anything else, commissioners? We're past our time and I try to keep us on time as much as possible. I have no matters from the chair. I think we've had a very productive presentation. I thank the individuals that provided comments. I really hope that we get more media out there and more information out there to let the citizens know that we're holding these hearings. Anything you commissioners can do to help boost the review of the concepts, as well as any potential comments that people are willing to give us, I certainly would appreciate, because without that insight from the community and the impact on it, you know, we're making decisions based on just our limited information in this group. So I really hope we can get that out there. So without Commissioner Quintana, your hand is raised.
My question is to Christine and to Geraldine. I was just wondering if in all the sending out of the meetings and everything, if it's in English only? Did you send Spanish too?
No, we did not send Spanish. Sorry, Madam Chair, Commissioner Quintana, we did not send the information in Spanish. If you would like, we can have it translated. One of the reasons we did not is because we try to make sure that if we're going to send something in Spanish, the page or the information that they're going to is also available in that language, but I'm happy to have some of the announcement translated as well.
I certainly defer to your expertise and you know, you do what you do and you know what you're doing, but just it was a question, and you know, if the chair or anyone else who wants to have any input, that's just my question.
Commissioner Quintana, that's a great question. I very honestly assumed that it was going to go out in Spanish as well. If that's doable, I think we should put it in Spanish. And if there's a phone number at the bottom of that press release, that if people want more information, then they can call it the city number. And we have people on the city payroll that speak Spanish, correct? So they could guide individuals and give information. So I think it's a great idea.
Just to clarify, Madam Chair, we don't have anybody on staff that would speak Spanish, but we can certainly have somebody present if requested at one of the meetings for translation services.
Okay. I think we need to do everything we can to make this transparent. Otherwise, we might be missing a major portion of the population that's going to be affected by these redistricting boundaries. So is there any comments by the commissioners in that regard? Does that make sense to other commissioners? I see some heads nodding. Yes. Okay. I got some thumbs up, Madam City Clerk. If you could please do that, that would be awesome. We really appreciate that. And anything else, commissioners? Our next meeting will be in person. It will be on May 24th. It will be our second public hearing, and it will be held at the Downtown City Library. Is that correct, Madam City Clerk? And what route? I'm not sure whether we would be meeting at the library. There'll be people there to direct us to where we need to go for the meeting. Is that right, Madam City Clerk? And then there'll be maps up, I understand, at those in-person public hearings, as well as screens for Mr. Sanderoff and his staff to show their PowerPoint presentation. Is that correct?
Yes, Madam Chair, our Assistant City Clerk and Mr. Padilla from our GIS department have been working together. Mr. Padilla has provided some very large scale, beautiful maps for us to display. So we appreciate both of their efforts to have materials in person for the downtown library meeting. And I think as Geraldine has done, she'll continue to put this invitation on your calendar, and she will put information about the location on there as well.
Okay, so in-person meetings will have maps on the walls and screens for PowerPoint presentation. Commissioner Brechner?
Let's see, am I mute? No,
No.
I'm on. Thank you. It didn't come up in the presentation earlier, but Mr. Sanderoff's group did put together the charts of populations and minority or special populations that have to be considered. And I wondered if we could have those charts perhaps available at the public hearings as well. The tables, if you recall the ones I'm talking about. Thank you.
And Madam Chair and Madam City Clerk, it'd be great if we could get those tables on the website too, that just show the stats for each of the concepts, percent deviation, percent adult Hispanic, which I think you have, but we can.
Yes, Madam Chair and Brian, they are on the website already.
Oh, the stats are great.
A great question, Mr. Sanderoff. What, Madam City Clerk, where are they? Because I looked for them earlier today. The charts, the spreadsheets that have each of the concepts' population numbers.
They're on a subpage called Redistricting Maps and Concepts from the homepage or from the main page of redistricting. So if you look to the left, there's a subpage, and if you click on that, then they're posted.
Okay, I'll look at doing that. Okay, anything else, Mr. Sanderoff?
No, ma'am.
Okay, commissioners, are we all set? Commissioner Brechner, you have your hand up still. More questions? Okay. All right, so it is 7.
Mr. Weber looks like he has a question.
I'm sorry. Oh, Mr. Weber.
I'm sorry. I just wanted to know if the May 24th meeting was going to be video recorded for those of us who won't be able to attend.
Madam City Clerk.
No, it will not be. It'll just be on location. That was one of the preferences that we had to consider, is if we were going to have the meeting live streamed, they would need to be in the council commission chambers, but instead the decision was made to have them in each district. And so with that, the presentations will be still available online with additional information, but that was basically the decision point, was to have them in different locations around the city.
Okay, thank you.
Good question. Any other questions? Okay, it now being 7:25, I adjourn this meeting of the Independent Redistricting Commission. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for your hard work. Appreciate all your comments.
Thank you, everyone. Appreciate staff and